Wake up.
Fear is not real. The only place that fear can exist is in our thoughts of the future. It is a product of our imagination. Do not misunderstand me. Danger is very real, but fear is a choice.
Greetings world. We are ANON DK. As we continue in our All in the Family series, we would like to remind you all that the facts stated here are for no other purpose than making note of key points of the bloodlines' beliefs, their mindset and why they do what they do, how they think and act, hopefully exposing it in such a way you can understand and know your enemy and act accordingly. The only purpose for the mention of their beliefs at all is simply because they are intricately woven in the reasoning, actions and history. We disclose all information found out about these people here. Comfortable or not, truth is not always pretty or fun. There are many proofs, including names of people documented in sacred, archaeological, and historical texts. All correlating versions of names used between these works we include and mention as much as possible, not to confuse but to educate. Names are changed constantly by the families, and the past researchers who have looked into the different names have not been able to tie them together, as we do here. Thanks to the internet, and the amount of information we can see, we are able to translate names, words and make the connections that could not be seen before. To our astonishment, we realized archaeologists, genealogists and historians from different countries and studies, languages, backgrounds have never connected the dots. People stay in a narrow rut of their thinking and education, keeping them blind and indoctrinated, disabling them from looking further and seeing the big picture, which leads to full truth. The deception is enough to blind the masses. We have discussed much of this before in our previous videos. We have already exposed the blood, the DNA and the importance of the female Qatar tribe's bloodline in these families. We will keep the repeating of information already put out in previous videos to a minimum. Once again, we suggest you begin with our movie Delete, and continue through the messages from there so you will have a full understanding of what we discuss. In this series we have exposed 5 of the papal bloodlines thus far. Perhaps when we have completed putting our document L the bloodlines into video, we will continue with the remaining 6 families of the papal elite. The elite families are very proud of the fact that they can trace their line back to Cain. When we saw this claim in a news article many years ago, we looked for this proof. The elite have been selfish and have not revealed this genealogy or history, killing most who have done so. We thought this highly ridiculous and decided to write it all out from beginning to end for you in our document, which was put out a couple of years ago. You may notice that in our previous videos in the All in the Family series, we have only discussed the genealogies back to several hundred years BC. We have stopped short because it is at this time the families were large and recognized as tribes. In this video we will discuss the time of the tribes and work from the beginning. We have in fact proven the elite are able to be traced through their genealogy back to Cain. In proving this, we have proven much more as well. So let us go to Cain, and start at what the elite have said is their beginning. In the beginning was murder. Cain is the first noted murderer. He was born around 4004 BC and was twin to his sister, Aklia. His brother, Abel was murdered by him because of jealousy when they were teenagers, and Cain married and had children with Abel's twin sister, Lelua. She was beautiful and Cain's lust for her was strong. Cain and his descendants were exiled and the bloodline was disowned by the family. Jumping forward, as we will not spend time on details that are so easy to find. We come from Cain through his lineage to Abraham. We have skipped many generations and many centuries. Many things we leave for you to find out for yourself. You do not learn unless you do the work yourself. We cannot spoon-feed everything to you. Nor should you believe everything we say without proving it to yourself. One woman, called Hagar, had Abraham's firstborn son named Ishmael in 1860 BC. Mother and child were both outcast because of jealousy and the excuse that she had bad blood. They eventually settled in the wilderness of Paran, which is now Palestine, where Ishmael married a girl from his mother's homeland of Egypt and Saudi Arabian areas. We have discussed the Kedar tribe, the female line, in our DNA videos and suggest you watch them for more detail on this. We will continue on. One of Abraham's many grandsons was Jacob. Jacob born 1791 BC and was a twin. You will see twins pop up frequently. He had 12 sons which went out to their own areas. Once their families were too large. By large we mean that each family had several thousand members. Being so large, they were each given a piece of land around the Middle East, Mediterranean and down towards Africa. This area was called Canaan. The land of Canaan, not to be confused with the man we will discuss next. This is the same area Rome with puppet Israel are attempting to take over currently. As we have discussed before, the bloodline wishes to reclaim its birthright. The 12 brothers' families, called clans or tribes, are in their father Jacob's land of Canaan, where they have separated to different areas given to them within Canaan. There is a bit of confusion through our history books today, so we will clear that up here. Remember who controls what you know. These families. They do not want you to know the truth, so they will keep it from you and easily can. The tribe of Dan included the relatives descended from Jacob's son Dan, Jacob's son Naphtali, and Jacob's son Asher. The 3 sons' families had grown so large, containing tens of thousands of people in each one. The 3 tribes were grouped together and had camped together for a long time. This is one area there is much disinformation on. People assume tribe of Dan means one family line, but it is 3. Dan was the largest family of the 3 by over 5,000 relatives. Talk about having a family barbecue with that crowd. We see the elite come from this tribe of Dan. These 3 families. So we will look deeper at these 3. We will not lump them together as everyone else has, as it only creates lies and confusion. These 3 sons' families camped facing north, the direction their descendants traveled later on. A bit about Dan and Naphtali themselves. They were twins, born in 1703 BC of a woman who had a different DNA from their father, his wives, and their stepbrothers. They were white, light-haired with light eye color, and they were unnaturally large and strong. Naphtali, like his mother, was deep into the occult and very aggressive. Naphtali means wrestling, and the symbol of this family is the deer or stag. Dan was in fact commanded, when he received his inheritance, to be a judge and watcher, to keep his brothers in check. Typical big brother stuff. His family adopted the symbol of the scales of justice and can be followed through history with this, as well as the symbol of the horned viper. Unlike the snake or serpent symbols used to distort, the horned viper, which was the same word used for scorpion in that time, was our equivalent to a fox. Quick, wise, cunning, camouflaged, dealing swift judgment on any who passed too close without bias. The mutant DNA their mother, Bilhah, had is only passed through the women and only forms in certain of their offspring. Dan was white-skinned, light-haired and light-eyed, tall and strong like his twin, but not abnormally large like a giant, or disfigured. This race has been called Qualkas, Elohim, Sumerians and the elder race Aryan. Needless to say, Dan and Naphtali were outcasts in their darker tone family, as was Asher because he was born out of marriage by a different woman. Not to mention for many generations their families lived next to each other. This made the three families very close. They had the common bond of being outcasts and offspring of different women. As they grew, their families became even closer, and finally as tensions grew between the 12 tribes, the three decided to leave Canaan and the lands given to them by their inheritance, and sail around in search of their own land. Thus the first pirates and Vikings were born. The three tribes became deeply involved in trade, gold, produce, and opium. These things have always been and will always be controlled by the bloodline. These are their sources for constant income. We can see the Vikings used the viper's appearance as their ship's structure, making it as easy to glide across the water as the snake glides across sand, silent and quick, while the pirate ships, clearly meant to carry goods, slaves, fur soldiers and especially heavy weapons like cannons. They have always been a war-loving people. That is one major way to follow the bloodline. Simply look at the wars and revolutions around the world and you will find them. Or of course, follow the money, or follow the drugs, or follow the religions. Follow anything really. If you look deep enough it will lead you to the elite. This makes it easy to see the difference in the tribes and their histories, knowing the interests in DNA. To mention Naphtali's family for a moment more, one of the first locations we see the tribe is Arcadia, which is Greece. We can see their language written in Akkadian archaeology, called Akkadian cuneiform, a written language or dashes and dots. It is seen today in an app for Twitter. Documents note their shepherding skills, wealth, beauty, piety and merchant status, which they kept through history. Around this time, we come across a few notable members of the tribe. The elite families are proud to claim ancestry to Nimrod, a Babylonian also known as Akkadian king, described as a giant, a murderous tyrant, and descendant of Cain. Nimrod, the great-great-grandson of Noah and son of Cush, lived about 2268 to 1868 BC. He built not only Babylon, later called Akkadia, but also Erech, Nineveh and Calais. Now we call his land Assyria. Nimrod's uncle, Canaan, not to be confused with the land of Canaan, had sons who also carried the bloodline. Remember, these families called tribes were tens of thousands of relatives and covered much of the land at that time. Canaan's sons were Zetan, Heth, Amori, Erdashi, Hivi, Arki, Seni, Arodi, Zemodi and Chamath. Sargon of Akkad. It is documented as a Semitic Akkadian emperor and was famous for his takeover of the Sumerian area in the 23rd and 22nd centuries BC. In Akkadian his name was Sarukinu, meaning the true king, or the king is legitimate. He killed the Cush king and usurping his throne before embarking on the quest to conquer Mesopotamia. He is the first documented king we see from the Naphtali family, since they typically had their Keter wives named queen, leaving the male as the secondary and lower power. As we have discussed many times before, they believe women are superior as they carry the blood. They make their high gods in female form. Now we have come quite a long ways in years. While we have been talking the sons of Jacob, the families have had many generations and formed their own tribes. They have traveled all over the place, from Israel to Russia to Asia to Rome. We will get more into these areas in time to come. However, in an attempt to reduce confusion, we will continue with those of the Naphtali tribe of the elite for now. In our previous videos in the All in the Family series, we have detailed the genealogies of the papal elite bloodlines back to the tribes. In this video we have gone to the beginning of the line. It will take several videos to bridge the gap, so let us continue looking at the elite's tribes. The family of Naphtali was deep into astrology and were intimate with the tribe of Keter because of Bilhah's blood. King David's son Solomon was born of a woman descended from Bilhah's tribe, the tribe of Kedar. So the two main tribes who have made up the elite bloodlines are the Kedars and Naphtali's. Naturally, some from the tribe of Dan as well as the tribe of Asher have mixed into this. But it is easy to spot the majority of the pure blood of the elite are from the combining of these two tribes. The star we see and are told is the Star of David has nothing to do with the house of David, but rather we see yet again the elite deception, using the pagan pentagram for sun worship, star, Saturn worship, Satan, the star which was the symbol of David's son Solomon. Though Solomon did have a change of heart by the end of his life, he was married to a pagan sun worshipper from the tribe of Kedar and was deeply involved in the occult himself as well. He was also a master builder, a mason. Unlike David, who was forbidden, the Star of David is in reality the seal of Solomon, and once again the world believes a lie. We see the star, sun halo covering history, art and statues, marking the trail of the Jesuit, Zionist, Freemason, satanic, popes and rulers even today. This halo or sun represents illumination, Lucifer. Everything is inverted, opposite. This elite group hides behind a facade and twisted definition of Jew, a derogatory term they created for those from the tribe of Judah. Their hated enemies, their brothers from another mother, the people they have murdered relentlessly for centuries, and the very people they claim to be the perfect cover. Keep your enemies closer. The elite control the world and they think they control you. Sadly, so do you, and so many do not even care. Remember this. They control everything and own nothing. Today we see the families controlling governments and all powers on earth. Do you know what they own? Their car, their jets and planes. No, they own nothing. Why do you think it matters so little to them if taxes are higher for the upper class in countries like America? They are not taxed. They starve people in Africa and Venezuela. They do not care because they do not starve. They do not care for you. They simply hold the cards of control, money. They control you to keep you at arm's length, to keep you from opening your mind and freeing your potential. They keep you brainwashed and deceived in every facet of life. They think you are a pestilence that must be destroyed. You must understand that. They think you are a pestilence that must be destroyed. To get a time frame again, about 900 BC King David had come to reign, just as the three families called the tribe of Dan began traveling around. After David, his Kedar-blooded son Solomon also married a Kedar woman and daughter of the Pharaoh and began worshipping Ashtoreth like her. Ashtoreth, known as Star or Sun, also known as Astarte, Chian, Kaiwan, Remphan, Rael and Saturn, derived from Satan. Solomon built altars using the symbol of the star we here referred to as the Star of David, more correctly the Star of Judah or the Judan people of Judah. Jew. Both David and Solomon are described as having red hair, white skin and a talent for music and taming beasts, and love of wine. David is known for his battles with giants, many of whom he defeated. In that day giants and nymphs and all sorts of creatures openly roamed the world and slaughtered many. This history is kept from you so you will be lost when they rise again, which will be soon. Back to the three families of the tribe of Dan, Asher, Dan and Naphtali. They eventually separated. However, historians and religious documents keep them under the same title, even after the clear split, to keep us all oblivious to the truth, to hide the elite. This is where one major confusion begins. If you follow historical documents closely, you can identify the differences and see clearly which tribes went where. The culmination of the three tribes known as Dan traveled west to the American continent, where some of the Asher tribes stayed. Here we see Native American Indian tribes, and further down, the Aztec and Mayan, and north, the Eskimo tribes as the families split and spread. These are from the Asher tribe. The remaining tribe of Asher split when the tribe of Dan traveled back toward Canaan. The Asher tribe settled in their brother's mother's homeland of Egypt and Arabian areas. Remember, Naphtali and Dan were born of a Keter woman. They reunited with the remnants of Bilhah's ancestors, which include Cleopatra, Narmer, Manes and more. The rest of the Dan tribe, which were now the Naphtali and Dan families, traveled north. Some of the Naphtali stayed in Ireland, Scotland and Britain as they sailed and explored the north. Britain was called Albion then. As they traveled, some Dan settled in Iceland, Scandinavia and Denmark, leaving the name of Dan on the territories they conquered. Let us take a look at the Celts. Since we are now in this area, we will look ahead to 500 BC. The Celto, known as Celti, remnants of the Naphtali tribe who had settled there centuries before, had grown quite numerous. They were the most powerful people with an organized culture and developed social structure. Their issue was they had no political unity, no government besides the leader of their clan. Each clan had a different dialect or language. We would call this a code in military terms. This continues today. The only remaining strain of one of their speech is heard in some Welsh dialects. When the Celts rose into Britain, the Druids came forth. The Celtic rulers, called Druids, were the guardians of traditions and learning. They were lawyers, doctors, poets, religious leaders. Sound familiar? We have discussed many times how the elite power structure works. They left no written accounts, and what the Romans wrote of them is that they performed animal and human sacrifice, believed in a form of reincarnation, and held a high position in the Gaul society, which were the Franks. This is all still practiced by them today. A historian of their time, Pliny, was able to record one of the rituals. He wrote, "We should not omit to mention the great admiration that the Gauls have for it as well. The Druids, that is what they call their magicians, hold nothing more sacred than the mistletoe and a tree on which it is growing, provided it is a hard timbered oak. Mistletoe is rare, and when found it is gathered with great ceremony, and particularly on the 6th day of the moon, hailing the moon in a native word that means healing all things. They prepare a ritual sacrifice and banquet beneath the tree and bring up 2 white bulls, whose horns are bound for the first time on this occasion. A priest arrayed in white vestments climbs the tree and, with a golden sickle, cuts down the mistletoe, which is caught in a white cloak. Then finally they kill the victims, praying to a god to render his gift propitious to those on whom he has bestowed it. They believe that mistletoe given in drink will impart fertility to any animal that is barren, and that it is an antidote to all poisons." Makes you think twice about mistletoe, does it not? So the Druids invade Britain and impose their religious, scientific, historic and militaristic ways of life. As they do on all they conquer, they dictated planting seasons, time, calendar, festivals and rituals, and glorified war, astrology and horsemanship. The current American president, Trump, is from a Druid bloodline of the elite. We will look into this region much more later on in about 1,000 years. Now we come to the mid-1100s BC, and many have heard of the Battle of Troy. We know a bit about Helen of Troy, enough to get the idea of her proclaimed beauty and how she bewitched and controlled the wills of men. Helen is depicted in Ezra Pound's Canto 2, which states, "Let her go back to the ships, back among the Grecian faces, lest evil come on our town, evil and further evil, and a curse cursed on our children. Moves, yes, she Helen, moves, like a god, and has the face of a goddess and the voice of Sagani's daughters. Doom goes with her in walking. Let her go back to the ships, back among the Grecian voices." After Troy, which was called Ilion and is in present-day Turkey, the 2 tribes of Naphtali and Dan split for good, and the tribe of Dan was dissolved. The remaining Dans went back to stay in Denmark, Britain and the aforementioned areas. The war-hungry nomads of Naphtali went on to possess the areas including Germany, Russia down to the Middle East, and Asian areas including the area the tribe of Keter inhabited, and Italy, where they reunited with their bloodline who had stayed in Canaan centuries before. This is what history books still name the tribe of Dan. It is Naphtali family. Just after Troy, a group of humans, led by a hero of Troy called Brutus, went back to Britain to defeat the giants of the Naphtali tribe and reclaim the land. Word had spread of the slaughter and mayhem going on, and once the illusion of Helen had been drowned in blood, the men decided to clear the world of the evil bloodline. For a moment, let us discuss giants, as they are the elite bloodline. Septuagint. Theodotion, Latin Vulgate, Samaritan Targum, Targum Onkelos and Targum Neophiti, are some of the words used in ancient texts which, when interpreted, mean giants, titans, violent ones, pirates, Nephilim and fallen ones. Know the terms and how they change language to language and area to area and time period to time period. Same meaning, different words. This is what makes people miss the full picture. The Watusi tribe in Africa at their typical height are 8 feet or just over 2 meters tall, which is small for the giants of old. We see proof of giants in archaeology across the world, as well as depicted extensively through texts, religious, historical and scientifically. This should be the topic that needs the least explanation in order to be accepted. Mummified giant remains have been found all across the world, from Italy to Jerusalem to the Midwest in the USA. Some have horns protruding from their skulls. Some are females covered in fur. Sounds like a werewolf to me. Most of the giants that have been uncovered are red-haired and mummified, as we would expect since we know the elite. Their practices and their DNA giantism has been proven to accelerate under the proper atmospheric climate, just like plants grow bigger and better under certain conditions. And a few thousand years ago the ozone layer was 6 times thicker than it is today. Oxygen in the air was richer. Now as thin as it is, everything is smaller, and everything dies faster. Skeletons prove they were quite a lot larger than we see them get today. However, as the red-haired giants of the Afghan mountains were very large indeed, it is obviously possible that larger-sized giants can still exist. The information is endless on these people, undeniably proving they did exist. The terms you feel comfortable using to describe them is up to you, but matter little. As we look at the ancestors of the elite, we come across many strange stories and documents thousands of years old describing them as they were before they perfected the breeding. Many kings of the elite bloodline, like the giant King Nimrod we discussed earlier, we see his picture enstoned as he carries a grown lion like a kitten. Anakim, giants, with skeletons 10 meters tall, which is over 30 feet, were found in Romania 1976. They were sent to Russia for analysis and never seen again. Typical. Quinamtzin was a giant killed by the Aztecs. Tenochtitlan was another Aztec giant who was involved in the community. Yes, of course, some are friendly and lived among humans, even married humans. You will find if you read enough historical documents, especially from BC times, giants and shapeshifters and all sorts of creatures exalted in Hollywood movies were quite commonly known by all. The American natives had such an issue with the 6-fingered giants they started giving the raised hand gesture in order to see who was friend or foe. The ones with 6 fingers and toes seemed to be an issue everywhere. Violent cannibals. Greek champion Ajax was a giant who fought in the Trojan War. Underground cities were built very long ago to keep the other species who live here secret from you. The list goes on and on of the covering and uncovering of historical evidences and archaeological finds. One need not look in archaeology to find giants roaming the earth today, though you can rest assured it is nothing compared to how they were. But now on with our timeline. Born in Italy 1131 BC, Brutus, also called Brutus Dardanian from Troy, eventually became king of Britain when he and his men killed a great number of the giants in Britain, and eventually the giant king Gog in a duel with Corineus, who was Brutus' best warrior. Corineus threw Gog over a cliff to his death. Brutus then created a city on the banks of the river Thames and called it Troia Nova New Troy, now known as London, where his palace once stood. We see a pagan temple to Diana now called St. Paul's, with the London stone being a part of the original altar. Britain is derived from Brutus. Brutus can be traced back to Japheth, one of Noah's sons. Brutus is buried on Tower Hill. His land was split between his 3 sons. Locrianus was given England, Albanacus, Scotland, and Camber was given Wales. During this time the Ark of the Covenant was taken by the Philistines, undiscovered until 1970s. The Ark of the Covenant had been buried in the side of a mountain which was later used to crucify criminals in the land of Judah, a province of Rome. It was found by Ron Wyatt, who discovered it under a crucifixion placing deep in the rock. The blood of who was crucified had been drained into the Ark of the Covenant through a crack in the rock. The Ark of the Covenant was built to collect the blood from sacrificed pure firstborn lambs, in order to purify one's soul from sin. The Israeli government took over this project once it was made known, and it is now in the possession of the Vatican. As we would expect, this is what Israel keeps saying is the last missing piece to complete the Third Temple. Whoever claims the Ark of the Covenant is still lost or missing is a liar. But back to the Naphtali tribe. As Brutus was conquering Britain and killing off the giants there, the Naphtali's changed their names as often as their camping locations within their borders. They are restless people. They continued in their trade of opium as well as oil with the Ashoketa tribes, as they were and still are their best sources of wealth. The area the Naphtali's traded and shipped their opium out of is what we now call the Golden Triangle, which is still the same opium business. Same routine, same profit today. A side note about the Golden Triangle. The Golden Triangle produces an unmeasurable amount of opium. Most of what is grown and harvested is never distributed. Simply put, there is too much opium to go around. The average Golden Triangle manager makes $5 billion per year. This is 1/5 of sales income. Think about that a moment. Owned by the British Crown colony, now London, Hong Kong is still the main money transfer station, with banks and organizations including Jardine Matheson, Charterhouse, Jaffet, Swire. The Naphtali family, which has now spread through Europe, Russia, Asia and the Middle East, was and still is known for its endless, raging, war restlessness, cannibalism, and deep occult beliefs, growing up to 11 meters, 37 feet, as they were giants and warriors then. As records show, they would have required much more to eat than humans. You can imagine the devastation and horror of those times. That is still no excuse for all of the pillaging and plundering. Pillaging and plundering are never acceptable forms of behavior. Around 800 BC, the Naphtali tribe thrived on the Palatine Hill for a few hundred years. The Vatican Hill is just across the Tiber from it. Vatican Hill, which is named for the goddess of death and the underworld, Vatica, has a deep cave system used as an underground graveyard. Palatine was the center of the world's richest and most advanced city, Rome. It is from this hill the stories come, of a cave under the hill housing Lupa, the she-wolf goddess who saves Romulus and Remus by feeding them her milk. Romulus and his twin brother Remus are then taken in and cared for by a shepherd. The brothers grew up and killed their great-uncle, who stole the throne, and built a new city of their own on the banks of the river Tiber. In another tale, Hercules kills the Cacus, a fire-breathing giant son of Vulcan, after he terrorized the people living on Aventine Hill, which went on to become Rhodes. The temple of Apollo as well as the palace rest on Palatine Hill. Tiberius, Nero and Domitian are a few who resided in the palace of Palatine Hill, meaning palace. In 776 BC we see the first recorded Olympic Games to celebrate the superior race. Homer writes his interpretation of the events of the day called Iliad and Odyssey. The wrong tribe from the west of Pannonia invaded the Jew region. The Jew king's power declined and the land broke up into separate states whose rulers were under one Jew king. Nobles became independent rulers and went to war, and the stronger ones conquered the weaker till there were only a few left. The king conquered its rivals and its ruler became Emperor of China in 221. It is interesting that in 716 BC Romulus, the first emperor of Rome, dies. He was also known as Quirinus and deified. As we already have observed, many from the elite bloodlines are sainted or deified. That is one way we can follow the elite. Just look up. They place themselves on thrones and pillars above us all. Numa Pompilius succeeded him as king. Around 545 BC a city formerly called Romula was founded as Rome. This was also the first culture to idolize people's faces by putting it on money. The first selfie. Note that this would be yet another way to identify the riches. By looking at countries' currency. Rome was supposed to be called Saturnia after the planet and god they worshipped: Saturn, Satan, Apollo, Lucifer. The name was changed to Rome in honor of the first emperor Romulus. It is interesting to note the more research done on so-called stories, the more fact they have than fiction. There is a reason. It should be obvious to those watching this. In 706 BC the city of Taras was founded by Spartan settlers. Lacedaemon is the earliest recorded Spartan who was king and named the land Sparta after his wife. They had 3 sons: Amyclus, Eurydice and Asyne. The land with its mountaintop temples and theaters has since been destroyed by fire and earthquakes. Like many of the bloodlines' dwelling places, Spartans only achieved citizenship through blood. They had to be born of the bloodline from Sparta, also known as Naphtali the elite. Spartans were Naphtalic or pure bloods. The Battle of Thermopylae, which was depicted in the Zack Snyder film 300, depicted the Spartans fighting tooth and nail, which according to Herodotus in his histories, they did. He wrote, quote, "They resisted to the last, with their swords, if they had them, and, if not, with their hands and teeth." End quote. The main weapon of a Spartan was a spear. Now you have seen the elite travel and spread through the North and South American continent, the Middle East, and wandering into Asia, spreading around through Turkey and back to Rome. As we continue you will see more details on these areas. The 12-month calendar we use today was created in Rome in 672. Yes, the calendar you use today is fake. The real one was censored and changed by them. It is time to wake up. Your reality is a dream. You live in the Matrix. Wake up, Neo. Wake up.